why was it important to focus on this story, and why was it important not to make the movie that so many people typically make about death row, which is the last-minute pardon?
I think when Allyn and I first read David's story in the New Yorker, David Gran, what was so clear to us, besides that inchoate rage that it really engendered in both of us, was that it seemed to be a catalog of everything that was wrong with the criminal justice system. It was junk science, it was prosecutorial withholding of exculpatory evidence, jailhouse snitches in exchange for reduced sentences. Most of all, it was about poverty and its effect on the inability to therefore get proper representation, which inevitably would lead to the bad result. And I remember I had read a book actually by Brian Stevenson saying that you have a better chance to, if you are rich and guilty, you have a better chance than if you are poor and innocent. So therefore, we took on this with an agenda. But I will also say that it was because we saw in it a human face. We saw the story of Liz Gilbert and Todd Willingham, and I believed that the idea of trying to talk about what that act of kindness and what a personal connection can do between two people to cause meaning in the worst of circumstances would be a very strong juxtaposition to the injustice that the movie was telling.
Allyn, when you go after David Gran's story in the New Yorker, what are the steps to get it from publication in the magazine to developed to actually produced? What was that journey like, and how difficult was it? Because obviously this is not standard studio fare.
Only 9 years. The beginning was quite interesting because I have a development fund, so I read the article and thought, this is a fantastic movie. And I called CAA, and they said, well, there's other clients that want it, so you're going to be down the line. And I said, well, tell whomever it is that wants to buy it that I would like to do it, and maybe they know me. And it was Ed, who I've known for 30 years, by the grace of God. And Ed's like, are you kidding? Let's just do this together, which is obviously an incredibly amazing blessing because it took 9 years to make it. And I think 30 years of friendship kept us going.
I want to ask you about what has happened since David Gran's reporting ended. There's been a Frontline special about this case and a documentary called Incendiary, the Willingham case. Was there more information that came out through the development of this project, through your own research, that added to what David Gran's amazing reporting already had established?
Well, certainly Bereshek and the Innocence Project had accumulated a remarkable amount after the fact. But mostly what we had Elizabeth Gilbert as a source, and she was exceedingly generous with us and gave us all of her correspondence with Todd and all of his correspondence with her.
So, Laura, I'm going to ask you.
Can I just add one quick thing? But in truth, it's been a horror show. Because every time we thought that the Texas Science Forensics Commission decided that it was faulty evidence, and we thought, okay, finally he's going to be exonerated. A judge in Navarro County wrote a whole opinion that he should be exonerated, shut down. Every single time since we started working on the article, there have been numerous occasions when he could have been exonerated, and it has just been swept away.
I hate to ask this, but isn't that in some ways make this point of the film more relevant?
Yeah, well, I mean, look, I think we have a much greater sense of injustice right now at this political moment than we have ever had in the country. I think we have an unindicted co-conspirator who's the President of the United States. I think we're aware of a disproportionate distribution of income. I think there's so many reasons for us to actually have some greater consciousness about unfairness.
Laura, I want to ask you about Liz and about meeting her. Was that something you were willing to do, reluctant to do? And what you took away from that beyond the gift of the letters, what was your impression about how she saw herself in this story and how her view of herself in this story evolved?
Well, I first want to say how blessed I feel that these amazing people to my left and right invited me on this journey. And you know, it's hard not to fall in love with the idea of Liz, but Liz refuted that. She was the most idyllic muse, I think, for both myself and Ed, if I may, because with that refusal to be Mother Teresa, she kept us, I think, very, in constant search for honesty and availability to anyone who would witness this story. She said, which I really loved in our first conversation, and our conversation started, and obviously she does not travel easily, and so she and I started by phone conversations and Skyping together, and her sharing all the letters, which was so amazing and generous. And one of the first things she shared with me was, she said, you know, I don't know what you guys are thinking, but I just want to be clear. I had seen this, you know, a group of people getting on buses to go to this rally, and they wanted to stand up to abolish the death penalty. And it was grandmothers and teenagers and so many different kinds of people fighting for this one cause. And I thought that was really interesting. And I learned that there was this program in which you could write a letter to a death row inmate. And she said, you know, there was that moment, like, well, I'm in between writing a play, you know, my kids are growing up, I've got a minute, maybe I can do this thing. In fact, it'll feel good because I've got 10 minutes, I want to feel like a good person. And I loved that she offered that sort of seemingly, I'm going to pat myself on the back and be, you know, doing something that's sort of an act of service. She said, please make sure there's a feeling of that in the movie, that this isn't this extraordinary person who did this thing. She was like, I'm just like everybody else. It's like, why not? Okay, maybe that's nice. You know what? Now we've written letters. Let me go visit him. Nobody else is visiting. But then your own internal investment occurs when your heart gets cracked open. And you see the loneliness of the place, and you witness the horror of death row. And then ultimately, as it started to unfold, she started to have a feeling that there was more to this story.
Ed, you very intentionally, I would suspect, follow the pattern of David Grann's article. And that is, if you read David's story, for the first half of it, you think he's guilty. That you, as a director, put the audience in the eyes of the jury. And I wonder why that was important to you, because it's important to David as a journalist. It's also important to you as a director.
It is, because I felt that what happened to Todd had to do with an objectification or a demonization that is also very common. He is the other, and he's the thing that society wants to blame and get rid of. And I think for us to form that same judgment is to make us all, we the audience, complicit. And therefore, I think it's only because of that complicity can you then take all the ride, must you take all the ride, and be forced to see the result.
Allyn, I want to ask you about making this movie, because one of the last credits we saw was shot in Georgia. That's a conversation we can have later. But did you try to shoot it somewhere else?
All end up in Georgia.
Did you try to go to Texas? And was that a possibility? And if not, why not?
Interestingly, when we were first mounting the production, someone that I knew from some time before we'd made a film together had become the head of the Texas Film Commission. So I sent her the screenplay, and we actually really like each other. She rang me up and she said, "You can't come here. It's not safe." And I said,
These
okay.
are words that are never spoken by a film commissioner. You can't come here.
Right, he expects the opposite.
She
What
was
was
my
the
friend
concern?
enough to say it's not safe. Well, this is a very provocative story, obviously in Texas, and there's been a huge cover-up. So there's a lot invested in keeping it covered up.
Allyn, Laura, and Ed, thanks so much for bringing us your film.